Nowhere in Mark, Matthew, or Luke does Jesus actually claim to be God in his own words. At best, it's just in John's Gospel that divine claims begin to appear. I and the Father are one, whoever has seen me has seen the Father, before Abraham was, ego eimi. I actually still don't think even these count, and we'll explain why in another video, but let's just say that they do. Even if this was Jesus explicitly claiming to be God, don't you think it's a bit suspicious that these claims only show up in our latest gospel?
So if Alex O'Connor thinks the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, don't hold much weight, let's step outside of those books for a moment. I still find John fascinating because it lays out some clearest pointers toward Jesus' divinity. But if you think John is insufficient, let's skip to parts of scripture that folks rarely touch when they talk about who Jesus really is. This includes anyone who doubts Jesus is God, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Jews, or even skeptical atheists. If that's you, maybe grab a quiet minute at some point and check these verses out. First up is Psalm 102, 25-27. Of old you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe, and they will pass away. But you are the same, and your years have no end. If you read the whole chapter, you'll notice the writer is in deep personal anguish early on. But then the focus shifts to God's external nature, in essence. So there's no confusion. This is talking about God. He's the eternal, unchanging creator, while everything else eventually fades away. Now hold that thought and jump to Hebrews 1, verse 8-14. Take a careful look at verse 8. It's talking directly to Jesus. Right, so in verse 8, but of the Son he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. Notice there it says, but of the Son. Then by verse 10, if you read slowly, you'll see it basically quotes Psalm 102. The very passage we just said is clearly about God. And you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment. Like a robe, you will roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will have no end. That means the eternal creator from Psalm 102 is now being linked to Christ, which begs the huge question. If Psalm 102 is about God and Hebrews 1 points it at Jesus, what does that tell us about who Jesus is? This isn't just some nerdy theology. It's huge. If your understanding of Jesus is that he's just a prophet or an angelic being or some elevated man, then he's not who Hebrews 1 describes. If he's not the creator himself, where does he get his authority? How can he really save anyone if he's just another creature? And if he's not fully God, then from an Old Testament standpoint, worshipping him would be idolatry. The Bible's clear that worship is reserved for God alone. So if Jesus isn't God, we're in serious trouble the second we start praising him. Now let's zoom out and ask a deeper question. What does worship really mean? In most spiritual or philosophical traditions, worship is more than a high-level respect. It's directing reverence towards something infinitely higher. If Jesus isn't fully God, worshiping him would be giving infinite adoration to someone finite, which is basically contradictory. According to classical theism, God isn't just a supercharged being with a ton of power. He's the ultimate foundation of existence. Bowing down to anyone less than that is like admiring a painting but ignoring the artist. When we apply that logic to Jesus, we end up with a massive philosophical statement. If the New Testament writers and the Old Testament references they use are on the mark, then Jesus is that foundational reality stepping right into human history. It's not just about fulfilling ancient prophecies or doing miracles. It's God Himself taking on our circumstances. Think of it, the one who keeps the cosmos running by His very word is willing to feel thirst, exhaustion, and even temptation. It suggests ultimate reality is not some remote force, but a personal being who actually bridges the infinite chasm between God and humanity. In philosophical language, it fuses transcendence, God is above and beyond everything, with immanence, God right here with us. It's like two ideas that shouldn't coexist suddenly meeting in Jesus. That tension, God being unchanging and yet experiencing human life, has intrigued philosophers and theologians for centuries. How can an eternal, all-powerful creator take on time-bound, fragile flesh, right? How can omnipotence include suffering? These questions aren't just academic. They hit at the heart of what it means to be human, what it means to love, and whether the infinite can truly touch the finite. If you follow Hebrews 1 and believe it's talking about the same God described in the Psalm 102, then the incarnation isn't a small side note. It's a staggering claim that God didn't stay distant but literally stepped into the world. Worshipping Jesus like that isn't idolatry. It's recognizing that the only one worthy of worship actually showed up in person. But I'm not just quoting verses at random here. It's about seeing how all of Scripture leans on the concept of God actively entering human history, all so He could close the gap between us and Him. The core claim of Christianity is that God didn't remain some faraway king on a throne. He showed up in our world. He walked our roads, felt our pain, was crucified, and rose again, driven by love beyond what we can fully grasp. That's not just an optional doctrinal stance. It's the central storyline binding the entire Bible. Think of a king who typically sends messengers to do his bidding, but one day decides to handle things personally. That's exactly the picture of Jesus we get from Scripture. The king who arrives himself. Passages like Psalm 102 and Hebrews 1 underscore that God didn't just dispatch someone else. He came in the flesh. Take that away and you lose the beating heart of the Christian faith. So if you're on the fence about Jesus' divinity, do yourself a favor. Open these chapters in your own time and compare them. See how the eternal, unchanging God in Psalm 102 matches what Hebrews 1 says about Jesus. Then ask, if the Bible really does present Jesus as God, can I keep viewing Him just a good moral figure? Because if He's not, these verses say He is, He can't be the bridge between humanity and Creator. And if you lose that bridge, who's going to save you? I hope that sparks a deeper look. This isn't about throwing proof texts around, but showing how Scripture, from beginning to end, points to God stepping into our story. If that's true, it's probably the most mind-bending, life-changing truth out there. So if you like this video, maybe hit like, subscribe, or leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. We can definitely keep digging into all this because once you see Jesus as God, a whole lot of other things begin to click. Until next time.